Here I have exactly 1000 Lego bricks, and today I'm turning them into a fully functioning aquarium. So that means it has to be completely watertight, it has to run a real filter, it has to grow live plants and actually house living shrimp. So can Lego actually hold water without leaking? Well, let's find out. So step 1 is the foundation, and I'm building the initial frame around a solid glass panel. And why not just use 100% Lego? Well, I did think about using a Lego base plate, you know, one of those big thin squares, but I seriously doubt that it will hold the weight of the water once it was done. So since I didn't want it to break and soak my bedroom floor with shrimp water, I opted for the glass panel. And I didn't actually plan the shape before starting, I just winged it and built a 2-block tall perimeter to see if it'd look good or not. And that's exactly where I hit my first problem. I literally did not have a single 2x2 piece, which meant that I couldn't make the front section perfectly flat like I wanted. So to fix this, I completely improvised and I made a wrapping edge 1 block around the front, so I could easily mount the glass on that later. And with that problem solved, I was feeling pretty confident. The shape was coming together and it looked great, but what I didn't realize though was that I had made a catastrophic mistake, and one that would come back to haunt me later in the build. So can you spot what I did wrong? Well, drop your guess in the comments. But meanwhile, while I was completely oblivious to the error I just made, I kept building brick by brick, pressing every single piece down as tight as possible so it could withstand the water pressure. So I just placed the 999th brick, and this is brick 1000, and this is also the piece of glass I'm planning on using. So I'm thinking I'm opening up one more bag of Legos, and we are going to be placing one final layer on top of this. And at this point I thought I was finished because the tank was looking really good, but when I inspected the tank from above, I could see that this side is like 2 studs of a brick shorter than the other side, and this means that the glass won't line up at all. So now I actually have to go ahead and disassemble almost the entire thing. Okay, so I've now rebuilt this section of the wall, and as you can see, when I line up the glass, it lines up with both pieces of the wall, which means that everything is as it should be. And if you're also planning on doing this, make sure to double check your construction, because this was a pain in the ass to redo. Alright, so now that the Lego frame is the correct size, it's time for the scariest part, and that's cutting the glass. So I first traced an outline with a Sharpie, and I then grabbed a glass cutting tool and scored along the Sharpie line. And since I've literally never done this before, I had no clue how hard I was supposed to press down on the cutter, and I ended up actually doing a couple of passes. And when I first went to break the glass, it was way tougher than I expected, but on my second attempt it snapped off completely flawlessly, which was incredibly satisfying. But of course, the next piece was a completely different story. This piece absolutely refused to break, and then I realized how dangerous and stupid I was being. If this would have broken right then, I could have cut myself very badly. So I put on heavy duty gloves and went really hard at it. But when it finally snapped, it did not break all the way. So with the big pieces, I just snapped them off with my glove, and then there was these tiny pieces that were left, and I didn't really know what the best way to remove these were, but I figured just using pliers and carefully removing them worked fine, and it actually did, but I should have probably sanded them down instead. But for now, this is perfect. Now, next up is the most stressful cut of the entire build, and that's the front viewing glass. And because this is the glass I'll be looking through every single day, a clean break is an absolute must. So I scored the line, I put on the glove, and I applied some pressure, but it completely refused to break. So I needed a new plan, and I grabbed some pliers and started lightly tapping along the score line, and I was hoping to just weaken it. But after only a couple of taps, the glass effortlessly snapped off and fell completely cleanly off. How crazy is that? And with the scariest piece finally out of the way, I checked the fitment and everything lined up perfectly. So I then took the Lego tank and all of the glass pieces outside to get them glued on. And that's where I hit another minor problem. My silicone tube had actually gotten stuck somehow, and I tried squeezing it really hard, and I mean like as hard as I possibly can, and the whole tip just popped off, and I thought I had to postpone the project due to this, but I actually managed to fix it by cutting a really big hole in the nozzle. And this worked out great, as it lets me dispense a lot more than normal, and for this tank I need a lot of glue, and I mean it when I say a lot of glue. You'll see why in a second. So I slapped on the bottom panel and I then glued on the front viewing glass, but at this point you're probably thinking this is probably never going to hold any water, but let me explain. So even though you press Lego bricks really tightly together, they don't sit completely flush against each other. there are always tiny gaps between the plastic, which means if I poured in water right away now, it would instantly start leaking through every single seam. But by smearing a massive layer of silicone over the entire inside of the tank, I'm creating a continuous waterproof membrane. But this does more than just seal the leaks. Water gets incredibly heavy, as you know, and the outward pressure would normally push against the Legos, disconnecting the bricks and bursting the wall right open. So this thick silicone layer is basically going to act as a heavy-duty glue, binding all of the bricks together and adding the structural integrity needed to hold all that water weight. And of course, with every single surface being completely blasted in silicone, the last thing left to do with this tank now is to wait one day to let the silicone cure. Alright, it's now the next day and the silicone is completely firm, which means it's cleanup time. And my application wasn't exactly flawless, so I had to take a scraper to the front viewing glass to make it clean and clean up all of the mess I made. Then I had a great idea. Since the tank is made of Lego, the light mount should also be made of Lego. So I grabbed some leftover bricks and I slapped together a custom light stand, and I honestly think this looks incredibly good. It ties the whole build together. So with the LED mount in place, we can start furnishing the inside of the tank. And I know it's a pretty small space, so I'm going with a sponge filter and I'm dropping it in first so I can bury the base under the sand to keep it locked in place. And when it comes to the hardscape, I didn't really have much of a choice. I'm still completely broke after dropping $1,800 on that crazy build a couple of months ago, so maybe check out my Patreon if you want to help me out. And instead of buying new stone, I'm just going to use some leftover lava rock that I had laying around. And I saw this picture from Green Aqua where they made like a floating rock arch, and I thought that would be really cool to replicate. So what I basically did is I took a tiny wad of cotton and I stuck it between the rocks and I soaked it in aquarium safe superglue. And this basically turned the rock into a solid structure almost instantly. And to make things a little easier on myself, I built it in a few sections outside of the tank and I then gradually added them inside of the tank. And I have to say, considering I'm no aquascaping master, I'm really happy with how this turned out. So with the hardscape locked in place with all of the superglue, it's now time to pimp out this structure with some real living plants. And I picked up this Anubias Nana bonsai plant, and it's a really cool plant because the leaves grow super tight and compact, so when it's placed right it can look absolutely amazing. And for mounting it, I wedged a few into some tiny gaps between the rocks, and for the pieces I wanted directly on the rock face, I used a little aquarium safe superglue to lock them right in. Finally, we cannot forget the moss, and you guys know I really love moss, so for this tank I have some incredible stuff called coral moss. Now this moss is actually pretty rare, so I didn't have a lot to work with. But even though it's really rare, my highly advanced planting method is still literally just to squeeze it directly into the tiny holes in the lava rock, and hoping that it naturally takes root and grows from there. So there we have it. The hardscape is complete and it looks amazing, and it's now time to fill it up with water for the first time and pray that it doesn't break into a million pieces along the way. And I just have to say, when I turned the light on for the first time, it was completely mind-blowing. Like I had no idea that it was going to look this cool. And I've been making some really cool builds lately, but this one is my absolute favorite by a landslide, and I haven't even added the cherry shrimp yet. But unfortunately, I can't just add them right away. I have to wait at least 2 weeks for this tank to cycle with the added beneficial bacteria, so I'll see you then. Fast forward a couple of weeks and thankfully we have 0 leaks. The water parameters are also looking spot on, so this tank is officially ready for life. And since the footprint of this tank is on the smaller side, I really didn't want to overstock it with any fish, so I went with these guys, red cherry shrimp. And honestly, I think these tiny red shrimp are going to be an absolute perfect match for the whole Lego aesthetic. And as you just saw, I put the shrimp through a drip acclimatization for about an hour to ease their transition into their new home. And this is really important because they are sensitive creatures and get stressed easily. So once the hour was up, I disconnected the whole setup and gently poured them in. And to me, it's always really funny to see how the shrimp react to a brand new tank, because usually when you add a fish to a tank, they get super stressed out and hide in a corner for a while. But the shrimp, they really don't care. They just immediately hit the water and they carry on with their scavenging like nothing ever happened. And it looks kinda surreal seeing these animals in a toy tank like this. So it was totally worth all of the hassle with the glass cutting and the silicone mess, and I'm certain that this is my favorite project so far. And if you also like this project just as much as I did, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button. Thanks for watching and bye bye.